Welcome to another round of Drawing Board or Miro Board. Today we talk brainstorms with UX designer Brian. Let's go. First question. You thought you'd see everyone's idea in the team brainstorm, but you've got a grand total of 1. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board, right? Because in Miro, the team can add ideas now or later. And with privacy mode, we can keep them anonymous until they're good to share.
Correct. Next, you need the best way to explain your idea, but all you have is a few sticky notes. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board, because, in Miro, I could record videos, add text, images, links, and digital sticky notes, of course, present my thoughts the way I want.
Right again. Now, you're looking for a past idea you thought was just genius. Only you could find... Oh, there it is. Drawing board or...
Miro. All our finished and unfinished work lives in one place.
And he's won.
Join over 60 million people getting ideas noticed in Miro brainstorms. Get your first 3 boards for free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you are joining us from ESPN Radio, thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today, because not only has the 2024 Chargers regular season schedule been released, we have a very, very special guest joining the show today. Like always, I defer all announcements to a one Dan Wolkenstein, and he's not going to waste another minute to tell us who it is that is joining Chargers Unleashed today.
So much news coming out of Chargers camp. Got a schedule release. We have a lot of roster construction, figuring out all of that. But before we go into any more of that, special guest today, friend of the show, Mr. Chris Hayre joins us. Chargers insider, works for the likes of KCal, sports anchor reporter, does Chargers Weekly every week with Matt Money Smith. One of the greats, knows a ton about this Chargers team inside and out. We'll talk to him about some of these drafted players. We'll talk to him about some of the sit-down conversations he's had with some of the coaching staff, as well as what his expectations are for this Chargers team, and maybe some of the differences between this new era, what we've seen prior. Super pumped to have Chris Hayre join us on Chargers Unleashed next.
But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that BetOnline is your number one source for all of your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow for your own favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Once again, that's BetOnline, where the game starts.
Well, like we mentioned before, super special guest, very much friend of the show. We've had him on several times since Chargers Unleashed has been around. KCal News, sports anchor reporter, Chargers Weekly podcast co-host along Matt Money Smith. You see him all over the place talking all things Chargers. Chris Hayre joins us again on Chargers Unleashed. Chris, welcome back, my friend. How are you, buddy?
Gentlemen, always a pleasure. It's an exciting time, but the NFL calendar really... They maximize this thing, don't they? We have 1 month of dead time from mid-June to mid-July, but everything else is rare to go. It's you feel the energy around the team and just the NFL in general, but the fact that Jim Harbaugh's in the mix now, it makes May even more fun than it's been in the past. So,
oh my goodness, yeah. You mentioned calendar. Schedule release just happened. A bunch of juicy matchups and things throughout the season. Looking at kind of the schedule as it kind of played out, what are some of the matchups that you have, storylines you're most looking forward to kind of perk your ears or eyes, I should say?
Well, I think everybody's going to point to some of the obvious ones, right? The Harbaugh Bowl and all the Ravens, the former Ravens that are now Chargers. That's an obviously intriguing matchup. But, for me, it starts with the Raiders. And it just the way that last year ended, how that kind of cleared the deck for Jim Harbaugh to come here, and the fact that Tom Telesco's there, Joe Alt versus Max Crosby, a divisional matchup. I really think the Raiders, to me, for whatever reason, I'm kind of gravitated towards that matchup because I just think it starts in the division, right? And we'll get to the Chiefs and obviously the Broncos, but the Raiders are the team that kind of made this happen, right? That Thursday night in Las Vegas was the reason why we are here today. And maybe it would have happened anyway. Maybe it would have happened in a different way. But it's hard to erase the memory of that Thursday night. So I think Antonio Pierce versus Jim Harbaugh, the style of football that we're expecting from the Chargers, I can't wait for that matchup. I know fans are excited about the Raiders too.
And obviously you mentioned all the storylines connecting with Jim Harbaugh. And Chris, we haven't even gotten a chance to talk to you since Jim Harbaugh was brought onto this franchise. And there has just been such a culture shift from the organization as a whole. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh brings all of his familiar faces from Michigan, building out this staff. You bring in Joe Ortiz for the front office. I just wanted your perspective specifically in just terms of how you feel the Jim Harbaugh effect has been felt from his moment of getting here, from the organization in general, and now the fact that we're in rookie minicamp. How is it being felt out there on the field?
It's just a complete 180, Jake. It's the simplest way to put it, a complete 180 from what we've seen here over the last several years. And you can point to the personnel being different. You can point to having a coach who's won at every single level. And I think it starts with that. Like, it doesn't matter if you are a rookie coming in here or you're a veteran who's been in the NFL for 10, 12 years. Jim Harbaugh has won at the NFL level. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's just coming off a national championship. You believe in this guy immediately. And I think that's the belief I feel like is there from all levels of the organization. And obviously we will see the rookies mix in with the veterans that's just starting now, and mini camp and training camp and all those things. But it was just something that was completely necessary, because like what's the definition of insanity? You can't just keep running it back and doing the same thing. And, you know, I know that there were some highs and lows this offseason with Keenan. People were upset that Keenan was traded. But the reality is, and I think Joe Ortiz was on with Kay Adams earlier this week and just said, hey, you know, we couldn't keep all four of those guys. We decided to keep the edge rushers. And, you know, he says, what my plan is, everyone's asking, like, how do I make Justin Herbert better? Well, I get the ball back for Justin Herbert. I get the ball back. Yeah. And, you know, we can dig into defense and all those things, but I just, the strength of this team is going to be getting after the quarterback. It's very clear. Like, you know, that cornerback room is still unproven a bit. But when you have Joey and Khalil and Thule and now Bud Dupree and Morgan Fox, I mean, Jesse Minter has identified, okay, this is how we're going to win. Right? We're going to get after the quarterback. We're going to make it very tough for opposing offensive lines. And, you know, hopefully the corners will develop quickly and understand the system. And it's exciting, you know, really everything about it is exciting. And you could point to so many different things. We could be here for hours talking about just the differences in everything this year versus last year, down to the practice facility, to, you know, just how Jim Harbaugh's approaching things. It's a breath of fresh air. I don't know what is going to happen in 2024 necessarily, but sometimes you gotta break it all down and build it back up, and that's what they're doing.
Now, you mentioned the defense, and one of the Chargers' defensive selections of the NFL draft that I believe will have a gigantic impact, more so than arguably any selection in this year's class, is Junior Coulson. And you got a chance to kind of sit down with him kind of face-to-face, one-on-one. What are your kind of takeaways from that discussion, and what are your expectations from Junior Coulson and maybe that linebacking core as a unit?
Yeah, that feature is going to air next week, I believe. I forget the specific day, but, you know, I know we're taping this middle of the week this week. But without giving too much away, it's one of those things, you know, when you see it, it's just like you talk to this guy, you know that this is going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem in the NFL. And he was joking that Jim Harbaugh, like during rookie minicamp, was like, hey, Junior, don't answer this. Junior, don't answer this. Because, you know, this is like an orientation for the rookies, right? Orientation into the NFL. But Coulson is in this unique position where he is a rookie, but you would think he's a veteran based on the staff, right? Like he knows Ben Herbert, he knows Jesse Minter, he knows the scheme, he knows Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh recruited him. The one thing that I thought was really cool that he told me was, during his recruiting process, like he chose Jim Harbaugh. And in the NFL, Harbaugh chose him to come to Los Angeles. So I thought that was really cool. But just an A+ person, you can tell right off the bat. And I think that's important. And he's a competitor. He's a big kid, and I'm excited to see how quickly he picks up the pro game. We know the fact that he knows the system, and he could probably wear the green dot and be pretty successful right off the bat because he knows the plays. But I think he has that presence to where he will have instant respect from the veterans. And I'm really excited to see him in this defense for years to come, not just this upcoming season.
What are your expectations for that unit alongside Junior Coulson? And you got, Navarro Bowman coaching these guys up, and you have some veterans. You also have Deion Henley, who everyone's still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. There's excitement around those two, obviously, but Denzel Perryman, like, what does that linebacking core look like to you?
It's a good question. In a perfect world, I think we would all like to see Henley and Colson out there a lot, right? We know what Denzel's capable of. Denzel's one of the hardest hitters in the NFL. So if he can give you some quality snaps, that's great. But it'd be nice to see Henley kind of come into his own and become a starter right next to Coulson, and had that young nucleus for years to come too. I mean, I think there's a reason why Eric Kendricks is no longer here. You let Kenneth Murray go and go to Tennessee. So I think big expectations are put on some of these young guys early, and we will see if Henley's up to the task in year two with a new defensive system. And it really is like a brand new environment for a lot of these existing Chargers players. Like you can, even if they didn't go anywhere in free agency, like they're at the same place, but it's a new place, and I think it's refreshing for a lot of them.
Yeah, and another one that you had spoken with was new Chargers offensive line coach Nick Hardwick, Chargers legend, fan favorite. And I got a chance to watch the spot that you had, and the thing that resonated to me was he talked about, like, you shouldn't have to guess if somebody cares. I'm paraphrasing, but how much he cares about this team and about winning and about the culture and building up a successful organization. Talk to us about the conversation with Nick Hardwick and kind of how you've been there, like on the field sometimes. Like, what's been that kind of dynamic with him and the players?
Well, Nick's just an awesome dude. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy. I mean, he's been the Chargers color commentator on the radio, obviously a legendary player, center, and now a coach. I give Harbaugh a lot of credit, though. Like, when you bring in guys like Hardwick who have played the game and know what it feels like, Navarro Bowman, who you guys just talked about, I mean, it's another one of his players who's just a monster on the field. It's important to have those types of players or coaches on your staff that were former players that did it at a high level. And for Nick, he did it at a high level, but he was also like, he was there during some of the glory days of the Chargers. And, he played the game a certain way, man. He was physical, he was nasty. And that's what this offensive line is going to become. And it's going to take some time, I think, to get all the guys that you need to do what you want to do on that line, because you're bringing a lot of existing players, right? It's going to be some competition at guard. You got Bradley Bozeman at center, but it's still at its beginning stages in terms of like crafting the offensive line. So, I haven't had a chance to be out there with Nick and the players and seeing them interact. I've seen video of him snapping to Herbert and stuff, and I thought that was cool. But actually, I did that interview with Nick a while ago. Like, it was in March. It was like way before the draft and everything too. But to see guys like that come back and be impactful contributors to what Jim Harbaugh is trying to do, I just think it's so much fun. It's fun for fans to see him.
Chris, the Chargers last week added another addition to their roster in bringing in Bud Dupree on a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
And obviously this is the edge 4 competition has been one, I think, that has required a lot of that over the last couple of years. I kind of mirror this move to when they brought in Kyle Van Noy. This is now a seasoned veteran. This is a guy who started for the Atlanta Falcons last year, gave you 6.5 sacks, and essentially now you're bringing him in to be your edge 4. I just wanted your thoughts on this because I think more in the big picture, this is Joe Ortiz once again doing what he said he was going to do in terms of finding opportunities to strengthen the roster at every opportunity. So in terms of Bud Dupree and adding to this defense, what do you think about it?
I love it. I love it. And I think it speaks to what I was saying earlier about the strength of the team, right? Like you continue to add to your strength, right? We know what Thule is. Thule's going to be a franchise player. Khalil Mack is probably going to the Hall of Fame. I mean, Joey Bosa, when he's healthy, we always have to say when he's healthy, but when he is healthy, he's a problem. So you continue to add to the strength of your team right now. And to get a guy like Bud Dupree after the draft, similar to DJ Chark, getting him after the draft. You're right. Joe Ortiz says that free agency wasn't over when the draft started. So to continue to bolster and just add competition, right? Like that's the biggest thing at every position for this Chargers team is that, if you're a player who was here last year, I mean, you're going to have to earn it. Like this is a big year for Chris Rumph. This is a big year for Isaiah Spiller. Like the guys who were here with the previous regime, drafted by the previous regime, like you were going to have to prove that you fit the style of football that Jim Harbaugh wants. And they wouldn't have brought in Bud Dupree if he didn't fit that style of football. So you're right. I mean, the fact that he started, I think 16 games last year for Atlanta, 6.5 sacks. And you're putting him in a position to where he's going to be on the other side of a Bosa or a Mack or a Thule. That just makes it, in my opinion, a little bit more dangerous. He's on the wrong side of 30. I think he's 31, but I don't know how many times he's been able to play with players that are the caliber of a Mack, Bosa, and Thule at the same time. So I really did like the signing.
You mentioned bringing in guys that fit the Jim Harbaugh mold. Let's go back just a couple weeks to the NFL draft, because obviously it was kind of mixed that first day on Thursday after the selection of Joe Alt, considering what fans were asking for, what people felt after the Keenan Allen and Mike Williams departure. And then you come out to the end of Saturday and you start looking through this and you say to yourself, the Chargers did a great job in terms of adding value, certain positions that they needed to add a lot more depth and competition to. What was your perception in terms of how they navigated that draft, what their overall plan was, and how has that differed between now and the previous regime?
Well, listen, I get everybody wanted to get a weapon for Justin Herbert, but have you seen the size of Joe Alt?
Yes.
That picture is insane. That
I don't think you can miss him.
I mean, come on. Like you're going to have the best tackle tandem potentially in the NFL for like the next 5 or 6 years. I mean, to protect Justin Herbert, to give Justin Herbert a running game. Listen, I would have been happy to see Malik Neighbors or, Rome Odunze, but really it was at that point at 5, Marvin Harrison had gone off the board. Like, who's to say Marvin Harrison wasn't the best player? I don't know who the best player that was on their board at 5, but who's to say it wasn't Harrison? Could have been, like they saw Marvin Harrison Jr. up close and personal in the Big Ten. But they stayed true to their word. They took the best player on their board, and that was Joe Alt. And I understand, like, especially in the off season, it's fun to talk about the flash and the kind of the sizzle, but that doesn't win you games. Guys like Joe Alt will win you football games, and to see this running game, that's what I'm really excited about this year, is to just see what Justin Herbert looks like with a running game, right? He doesn't have Mike Williams anymore. He doesn't have Keenan Allen, but to your point, Jake, you get Ladd McConkey, right? You get Junior Coulson. Like you're building a team. Like you're building a team from the ground up. And, receivers are making so much freaking money now that, I mean, there was no way you were going to be able to keep both Keenan and Mike. And I love Keenan. All right. Like he's a good dude. He's amazing. He's the best route runner in the NFL next to Devontae Adams. But you always hear that. I think it was, I don't know if it was Bill Walsh that just said, you know what, you never want to get rid of a player a year late, right? It's always like maybe a year early. And I hope Keenan has an awesome year in Chicago with Caleb Williams, and he probably will. But it was a lot of money. It's a lot of money to give a receiver who's, 31, 32 years old. And, you're trying to rebuild a team, and you're trying to build a team in an image that's vastly different from what has been going on here the last several years.
For those of you tuning on ESPN Radio, be sure to check out the full episode on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. We're talking to Chris Hayre, Chargers co-host of Chargers Weekly. Excuse me. Let's talk about rookie minicamp so far. Tons of videos and highlight clips and excitement about the rookies. What are your kind of main takeaways? You've been there a few times. What are your main takeaways that you've seen of rookie minicamp? Maybe something tangible that folks don't see in the highlights or things that they see in the press conference. Like, what did you see that maybe you're like, interesting?
Well, there's very little you can take from rookie minicamp that's tangible on the field, right? I mean, they're just doing some drills. Right? It's like there's not much you can really take from it. Justin Herbert isn't a rookie. He's not out there throwing the football, right?
Sure.
What I did notice, and I think Coach Harbaugh alluded to it, was this truly was an orientation into being a Charger in 2024. I thought it was cool that all the players were actually wearing their game uniforms. Like they were wearing
I noticed
game
that,
uniforms during rookie minicamp. I mean, like, I'm sure for people who listen to your show, they probably listen to Coach Harbaugh's presser too, but he talked about how we wear our pants, how we go into the huddle, how we come out of a huddle, how do we, we keep our shirts tucked in, and you could say, hey, that sounds very like kind of college or high school, but no, this is what I feel like has been missing. Okay. Like there are certain teams that I feel like if you do the little things the right way, you see, like you talked about Ben Herbert, right? Ben Herbert's attention to detail, like putting the weights back properly, right? You may think that that's something, oh yeah, you do that in high school or college. No, if you are meticulous like that in all aspects of your craft, that will show up on game day, right? And this isn't just a college coach coming into the NFL. This is a guy who's done it at the NFL level, who was an NFL quarterback, right? So you mix in his experience in the pro game with how he conducts business, right? And how he does things. I love it. Like I subscribe to that type of stuff because I think it matters. I think culture matters. I think just how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Like, so to see that specifically, right? And it may not happen in all 32 camps. Everybody and every coach has a different way of doing things, but the attention to detail, and really it just screams like, hey, we're doing things different now. Like we are doing things different now. So I appreciated that aspect of it because like I said, there's very little you can take on field right now in mid-May during rookie minicamp. Those guys are not going full speed. They're, Coach Harbaugh even said they flew in the day before, so their head was spinning, so it's good to see them and in the fact that they are getting acclimated to the NFL world and the way that Jim Harbaugh is doing it. I think that was maybe my number one takeaway.
And Jake and I talked about this before, and I thought about this. Without meaningful change, like nothing meaningful will change. And so that sometimes gets uncomfortable for people when they see these big changes within an organization or roster or construction. But the meaningful changes had to occur, or else, to your kind of point earlier, it's the definition of insanity. So you kind of have to embrace it, embrace a new culture. And I think that should have Chargers fans excited. And
Dan, it'd be one thing if it was a rookie head coach coming in and doing this, right? It'd be one thing, right? It'd be like, okay, well, hold on a second. Has this
It's a
guy
little
done this
gimmicky,
before?
never works, Yeah.
No, it's different when a Hall of Fame caliber coach is doing it. It's just different.
Yeah, and speaking of different, wide receiver room, it's clearly a little different than it was, or than folks are used to seeing here in LA. What do you see as kind of the makeup of the current wide receiver room, and how do you see the workload being divvied up on game days? I'm not saying wide receiver 1, 2, 3, but how do you see kind of the roles, responsibilities being divvied up on this team and what they're going to be asked to do?
That's a great question. I really don't know. Like the whole Lad, I loved Lad McConkey like throughout this process, but half of the process, Keenan Allen was on the roster, so I was like, maybe he doesn't make as much sense. But I could see him as the go-to guy for Justin on third down. I think he's got some explosiveness that he could take a screen, 50 yards. It's a huge year for Quentin Johnston. It's a huge year for Quentin Johnston. Joe Ortiz talked about him too on Kay Adams' show. I was watching that interview yesterday, and he said, like, we liked him in Baltimore, and we think he's got rare ability and traits, and it's up to him. If he's going to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, whatever, like it's up to Quentin as to who he wants to be. Joshua Palmer is a guy that I feel like we all like as a player. I think DJ Chark is another player who could benefit from having a guy like Justin Herbert throw him the football. Obviously, Cornelius Johnson, everyone talks about his run blocking, and maybe he can pop on special teams. Brendan Rice, dropping all the way to the 7th round. I love the Chark signing because it signals to me that, don't get comfortable, Joshua and Quentin. Like, don't get comfortable this offseason. This is all about competition, right? And we're going to have more than just a couple of 7th rounders pushing you. And that's what this wide receiver.
What do you make of the receiver room, though? Because that's a lot of names you just rattled off.
Yeah.
And there's no way they're going to keep 7, 8 receivers on this. I mean, maybe, I guess. But
what I make of it is competition. Like, nothing is set in stone. Nothing is set in stone. And if you're not fitting what they want, there's somebody in that room that can do that, right? And I say this about some of the other guys I mentioned. Like, if you're drafted here, they drafted you for a reason. They think that you fit what they want to do. So the guys who have been here need to show that they can do that as well, and they can do it at a higher level. So that's what we all should make of it right now. That what we should make of it? We don't know. We don't know what to make of it at this point. but that's what's fun. And you know what? Maybe they're not done. Maybe they'll add another body in there to just for July, right? For training
just
camp.
to freak out Chargers fans for another few months.
Just, hey, we want to see, let's see what minicamp brings, and let's see what the beginning of training camp brings. But I want Quentin to have a great year. I think he really got beat up this year a little bit by people, and I know he had some tough games, no doubt, but I don't think that this is the last of Quentin Johnston. I do think that they could, if they can put him in the right position to be successful, he's got to catch the football. But I do think that there was a reason why he was drafted in the 1st round, right? He has these rare traits, and it's up to this coaching staff to try to get the most out of him.
You're talking about just in general, the I don't knows of the roster. There's so many unknowns as it stands right now as it relates to turnover and change in a small amount of time on the defensive side of the ball. Defense has new faces all over the place, including a new staff led by Jesse Minter. What do you foresee to be just the biggest differences in this new scheme? I know you obviously had mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that they know that they want to get after the quarterback, so they know they want to press there. But a lot has been taking into this deeper with Steve Klinkscale, with Chris O'Leary earlier this week, and talking about what they want to do. But just in general as a whole for this new scheme with Jesse Minter, what are your biggest takeaways from that?
Man, well, I go back to even what Mike McDonald was doing at Michigan, and they won in different ways, right? They won with Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson that 1 year. They were like, okay, we got elite edge rushers, and then the last couple of years it's been the interior guys that have gotten after it, right? Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, who's still there. So I don't. How it looks to me is that Jesse Minter was like, okay, can we keep both Bosa and Mac? Right? Like, can we keep both Bosa and Mac?
I could cook with this, yeah.
Because I think I could cook with this. And I think the biggest thing, Jake, is how they deployed Derwin this year. Derwin, as you guys know, like he had so much on his plate the last couple of years in that defense. And if they can let him play freely, loose, closer to the line of scrimmage, this Mike McDonald type defense, we saw the Ravens, like the Ravens were by far the most hard-hitting physical team the Chargers played last year. Like it was like every hit in that Sunday Night Football game.
I was at that game.
Absolutely brutal. And I feel like we get caught up in these cliches. And I honestly, I'd like to ask the coaches and how we can dig in more on this, because we keep saying this team is going to be physical and they're going to be tough, right? But what does that mean? Like,
that's what I'm trying to figure out.
If you're in the NFL, like you have to be physical and you have to be tough. So let's dig deeper into that, right? Like it's like what they're teaching. It's
how
exactly the how is what I think needs to be defined a little bit more when all of us are talking about how they're going to be fast and physical and 60 minutes of football. Like some of it you can define, right? You can say, okay, well, that's why that brought Ben Herbert in here. These guys are going to have the stamina to play 60 minutes and they're going to be tough enough to play through injuries and prevent injuries. So yeah, the whole Minter defense, I can't wait to see it unfold too, because he's even said, I've seen YouTube clips of him talking about the differences between the college game and the pro game, and how in the college game, you have a large quantity of plays, right? And in the NFL, it's more like, okay, let's try to make every play perfect. So how do you adjust to that? So as this thing unfolds, it will be fun. How much fun is training camp going to be, watching like both sides of the football and just picking up new things that, we've been so used to seeing all the same guys over the last few years. But this is like, it's not an expansion team. It's just a completely brand new team. And, their philosophies and everything is fun to dig into right now.
Flip it over to the offensive side of the ball, because one thing that has been true since day one in terms of Harbaugh's message, in terms of one thing that was going to get fixed, he said the running game was going to get fixed one way or another. And they did a lot of retooling at the running back position. You go out and you get Gus Edwards, you sign J.K. Dobbins, you go out and you draft Kamani Vidal. I see this as totally being a running back by committee, much like they did in Baltimore, and how they're going to deploy this. Like, not only are they going to run the ball, but we're going to give you a different taste every time that we do it. So in terms of how the running back room has looked previously, when outside perception has been asking, who's going to be the running back two that's going to step up and help Austin Eckler? And now you've got a very stacked running back room in general with that personnel. So give me some of your takeaways in terms of how they've attacked this position, approached it, drafted it, and now built it out for the team.
It starts with Joe Ortiz. He knows these guys from the Ravens, right? He was responsible for bringing those guys into Baltimore. So he knows the type of football players they are and the type of running backs they are, and they fit perfectly with what Jim wants to do. So I look at it the same way you do. I think it's a running back by committee that starts with Dobbins if he's healthy. Like if Dobbins, that's the biggest question mark going into September is he really 100%? Yeah, he says he's 100%, which is awesome. But once you get through practices and training camps and get cleared by the doctors, like how close to 100% are you going to be in September? Because if he is, man, he's a really, really good player who has proven to get large chunks of yardage. Gus Edwards is just, man, he's a hammer. I think Vidal, like I saw Baldy did like a Baldy breakdown on him on Twitter. I'm like, this is a 6th round pick. So,
Crazy.
obviously, but Baldy sees something too. And then there's Isaiah Spiller, who's super young, man. Like he's 21, 22 years old. So, you know, you would think that Spiller and his style of running at Texas A&M would fit what they want to do. So I'm with you, Jake. I think that all four of those guys could really succeed, but how many do you keep? Because, you know, you brought in Ben Mason too. Is he going to be part of like the tight ends room or the running backs room? And obviously injuries and all those things that happen throughout the course of July, unfortunately. So we just have to kind of see how that looks. But I like the look of the room. And if Dobbins is healthy, I think that's the X factor.
We've gotten so much out of these conversations. Every time we have Chris Hayre on the show, I have to like go back and listen to it because I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Or after it. So you're incredible. No, seriously. Last question for you. We'll get you out of here. I think you kind of talked about it a little bit with the, you know, when you hear so much about physicality and like, okay, well, how exactly is that going to look? Like, what does that look like? And how is that going to be different than the last 3 years when we heard Brandon Staley and company talk about we're going to be a tough and rugged football team and bring your lunch pail. And then we saw week after week, it didn't work out. In terms of like game days, how do you see like the signals of success look like for this team? And I'm not just talking about wins and losses or if they're going to protect Justin or if they're going to sack the quarterback, but like, what are some of the signals that you're looking for that will signpost to you maybe, okay, yeah, this team is doing what it was scheduled to do. Like this team is different. This team is bought in and playing together.
It's a good question. I think getting out to leads with the running game, like when you can run the ball effectively and get up 10-0, 13-0, 14-0, whatever. I think that's the sign that, you know, the formula is working. And, you know, if Justin, how much success he can have off of play action with that running game too. But, you know, I go back and forth to that question all the time. Like, what is physicality and tough and rugged? I think it also comes down to the player itself, the type of players you are bringing into your program that have a mentality of like never say die, that have a, you know, it's a Chargers podcast, so I hate to bring up a rival, but like a Max Crosby whose motor literally never turns off, right? Like those types of players, like those are players you recruit. Like, you know, you'll look at a scouting report, and if some of it says, hey, he may take a play off or two, it's probably not the guy that they're looking for, right? So I remember too, and again, these are just little things that maybe have no correlation to winning or not, but like you guys remember week 4 when Jerry Tillery took that cheap shot and the entire Chargers team circled him? Like, I want to see that like for 17 games. Like I think that's the type of mentality that that is almost required to win. Like you have to be a complete team. You have to have each other's backs. And when you get out on that field, it's just, you're different. You're different for those 3 hours. And, you know, again, a lot of players that we haven't seen wear powder blue before that we will. And it's exciting to identify those guys throughout training camp and as we start in September.
Yeah, I look at signposts and I just keep going back to last year, especially, and the different times that we saw just like fundamental breakdowns in the secondary. I was at Lambeau Field and I watched what happened with Mikey Davis and with Asante Samuel Jr. and broken tackles and how many missed assignments there were throughout the year. And that connectiveness and cohesion of the secondary, specifically that cornerback room, which I know right now there's so many questions and variables. That to me is kind of like, if that group is figured out in a mentor defense, it's a sign of good things to come. They mentioned it. If they can run the rock, they can get a lead. They're going to keep a lead with this style, but they got to get there first. Chris Hayre, friend of the show, man of the people. Thank you so much for doing this. You're
Appreciate
incredible.
You guys.
What are you guys up to? What are some of the things you got going on? What are you cooking?
Bunny and I have a schedule release pod out this week, and you know, just keeping tabs on the Bolts throughout the next month or so during OTAs and in mini camp, and then I think we all get a break here in a little bit. But I've been busy over at KCAL though, just much more than just the Chargers. A lot of fun stories we're working on and covering all sorts of things right now.
KCAL News anchor, reporter, Chargers Weekly co-host, friend of the show, man of the people, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this, man. You're always welcome on the show anytime, all right, my friend?
All right, man. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Man. Have a good one. For Chris, Jake, myself, Chargers Unleashed. We'll talk to you next on Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another round of Drawing Board or Miro Board. Today, we talk brainstorms with UX designer Brian. Let's go. First question. You thought you'd see everyone's idea in the team brainstorm, but you've got a grand total of 1. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board, right? Because in Miro, the team can add ideas now or later. And with privacy mode, we can keep them anonymous until they're good to share.
Correct. Next, you need the best way to explain your idea, but all you have is a few sticky notes. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board, because, in Miro, I could record videos, add text, images, links, and digital sticky notes, of course, present my thoughts the way I want.
Right again. Now, you're looking for a past idea you thought was just genius. Only you could find... Oh, there it is. Drawing board or...
Miro. All our finished and unfinished work lives in one place.
And he's won.
Join over 60 million people getting ideas noticed in Miro brainstorms. Get your first 3 boards for free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.